She never meant to walk into that restaurant. The storm had driven her off course, her heels clicking against wet cobblestones as rain plastered her dark hair to her cheeks. She pushed through the door gasping, and the entire room went quiet. Not because of the thunder. Because of him. Dante Ricci sat at the head of the longest table she had ever seen, surrounded by men in black, a glass of red wine frozen halfway to his lips. His eyes found hers across the crowded room like a bullet finding its mark, and something ancient and violent stirred behind those dark irises. Something that had been sleeping for years. And just like that, both their lives cracked open. Welcome to the Mafia Codes channel, besties. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now because we do not do ordinary love stories around here. We do the kind that shake you. Please like this video, share it with your best friend, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from tonight. Now, let us get into it. This story is entirely fictional. All characters, names, and events are imaginary. The restaurant was called La Stella Nera, the Black Star, and it sat at the edge of a narrow street in downtown Chicago, like a secret nobody dared to speak aloud. It was not listed on any food app. You did not find it through a search. You were invited, or you stumbled in from a storm, which is exactly what Scarlett Monroe had done. She was 26, curvy in a way that made tailored clothes look like they were designed specifically for her body, with deep brown skin, wide amber eyes, and a laugh that could light up a room when she chose to use it. Tonight, she had not planned to laugh at all. She had planned to deliver a package for her courier job, get paid, and go home to her apartment and her cat and her lukewarm dinner. Instead, she stood dripping in the doorway of what was clearly a private event, clutching a sealed envelope and trying very hard not to make eye contact with anyone. She failed. Dante Ricci was 34, the kind of man architects built grand rooms for just so he would have somewhere appropriate to stand. He was dark-haired, broad-shouldered, with a jaw like carved marble and eyes so deeply black they seemed to hold weather inside them. He ran 3 legitimate businesses in Chicago and 2 that no government agency had ever successfully documented. He was the kind of man other powerful men called before they made decisions. He was the kind of man whose silence at a dinner table meant someone was about to have a very bad week. He had not felt surprised by anything in 11 years. Until now. He set his wine glass down slowly. His Lieutenant Marco leaned toward him and said something. Dante did not hear it. He was watching a woman in the doorway shake rain from her shoulders like she was shaking off the whole world, her chin lifting slightly as the room stared, refusing to be embarrassed by the accident of the storm. He stood up. That alone made 6 men reach discreetly for their weapons. He crossed the room in long, unhurried strides, and every conversation in La Stella Nera lowered itself to a hush. He stopped in front of her. Up close she smelled like rain, and something warm underneath it, vanilla maybe, or something close to it. Her amber eyes met his dark ones, and she did not look away. He noticed that immediately. Most people looked away. "You're lost," he said. His voice was low, Italian accented, a voice built for quiet rooms and serious conversations. "I have a delivery," she said, matching his calm tone despite the fact that her heartbeat had just decided to become unreasonable. She lifted the envelope. "For a Mr. Ricci." He looked at the envelope, then back at her face. "I am Ricci," he said. Something passed between them in that 2-second silence, something electric and ridiculous, and completely unwelcome as far as Scarlett was concerned. She pushed the envelope toward him. He signed her form with a pen produced from nowhere by a man who appeared silently at his elbow, and she turned to leave. "Wait," he said. She paused, one hand on the door. "The storm is getting worse," he said.
"Sit. Eat.
Leave when it passes." She turned back to look at him. He was already walking back to his table, as though the matter were settled. As though she would simply follow because he had spoken. She absolutely should have left. She sat down at the small bar table near the window instead, accepted a bowl of pasta from a waiter who appeared before she even opened her mouth, and spent the next 40 minutes pretending not to notice that the most dangerous-looking man she had ever seen kept glancing at her from across the room like she was something he was trying to solve. The next day, a black car was parked outside her apartment building. Scarlett noticed it when she left for her morning shift. She paused on the steps, studying it. Tinted windows, no plates visible, engine idling. She pulled her jacket tighter and walked past it deliberately, choosing to believe it was none of her business. It was gone when she returned that evening. But there was a small box on her doorstep, wrapped in dark paper with no card. Inside was an umbrella, bone white with a black handle, and a single dried black rose. She stood in her doorway holding it, heart doing something complicated. She told herself it was a coincidence. 3 days later, Scarlett took a package to a corporate tower in the heart of downtown and was directed to the 40th floor. The elevator opened into a reception area, all dark wood and clean lines, and the receptionist took one look at her and said, "He is expecting you." Scarlett frowned. "I did not call ahead." "He is expecting you," the woman repeated pleasantly and gestured down a hallway. She found Dante Ricci behind a desk the size of a dining table, reading something, still in a perfectly cut black suit, as though he had been born in formal wear. He looked up when she entered, and the corner of his mouth moved, barely, like a ghost of something. "You sent someone to follow me," she said, skipping every greeting available to her. "I sent someone to make sure you arrived home safely," he corrected, without apology. "That is the same thing." "It is not," he said, and set his papers down. "Would you like to sit?" "I would like an explanation." He studied her for a moment. "You walked into a room full of men who do not usually let strangers walk back out again," he said, voice even. "I wanted to ensure nothing followed you home." She stared at him. "Are you saying you were protecting me from your own people?" "Yes." The honesty of it caught her completely off guard. She sat down. They talked for 22 minutes, which was 22 minutes longer than she intended. He asked about her job, and his questions were genuine, not polite filler. He told her almost nothing about himself, but listened to her like she was the most interesting problem he had encountered in years. When she finally stood to leave, he stood too, which felt more formal and courtly than it had any right to. "I do not usually accept gifts from strangers," she said at the door, thinking of the umbrella. "The weather forecast was unfavorable," he said simply. She left. She thought about that sentence for the entire drive home. Later that week, Scarlett mentioned the encounter to her best friend Dana over the phone while stress-eating leftover fettuccine on her kitchen floor. "He tracked you down at work," Dana said. "He says he was protecting me." Scarlett. "I know. He is either deeply romantic or deeply unhinged." "Can it be both?" Scarlett said quietly, and then immediately regretted it. Dana made a noise that meant she was going to bring this up for the rest of their lives. Scarlett did not seek him out.
She was very deliberate about this.
She took different routes. She declined the one package delivery that was flagged for his building, and she spent a solid week being entirely sensible and reasonable and unaffected. Then she walked into a gallery opening on a Friday night because her colleague had a piece displayed there, and Dante Ricci was standing in the middle of the room with a glass of champagne, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, talking to a woman in red who was beautiful in the effortless, devastating way of someone who had never once had a bad day photographed. Scarlett felt something hot and unwanted move through her chest. She turned to look at the nearest painting instead. "It is a poor imitation of Caravaggio," said a voice directly beside her. She startled. He had crossed the room silently. She had not heard him move, which should have been alarming but instead just felt like a very typical Dante Ricci thing to do. "What are you doing here?" she said. "I was invited," he said. "By whom?" "The same person who invited you, I expect," he said, glancing across the room to where her colleague was beaming beside his sculpture. "Your friend Marcus and I have a business arrangement." She looked at him sideways. "Is everything in this city connected to you somehow?" "Not yet," he said, and the quiet confidence of it was so absurd, she almost laughed. Almost. The woman in red appeared at his elbow. Up close, she was even more stunning. She touched Dante's arm and said something in Italian, low and personal, and Scarlett felt every muscle in her body politely excuse itself. "I should go find Marcus," she said. "Scarlett," Dante said.
She paused.
He had used her name. She had not told him her name. "How do you know my name?" she said. "Your delivery forms," he said, entirely unashamed. I read carefully. The woman in red was watching her now with curious, assessing eyes. Dante had not looked away from Scarlett's face. "This is Chiara," he said. "My cousin. She is visiting from Milan." Scarlett looked at Chiara. Chiara smiled, warm and knowing. "He spoke of you," Chiara said pleasantly. Dante said something sharp in Italian that made Chiara laugh and look more delighted. Scarlett's chest did the complicated thing again. That night, walking to her car, she heard footsteps behind her, and every city instinct she had snapped awake. She spun around with her keys between her fingers and found not Dante, but two men she did not recognize, neither of whom looked like they had come to return a lost umbrella. "You have been spending time with the wrong people," one of them said. Before she could process what that meant, there was a sound behind them, and then both men went very still. She looked past them. Dante stood at the mouth of the alley, hands in his pockets, expression completely calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than fury would have been. "Walk away," he said quietly. They walked away. Immediately. Without another word. Scarlett stood there breathing. Dante crossed to her, scanned her face, her hands, her posture the way someone checks for damage after something breaks. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No," she said. "Then, who were they?" "People who are no longer going to be a problem," he said. "Dante. You are safe," he said, and it was so simple and so absolute that she believed it entirely, which frightened her far more than the two men had. The following morning, Scarlett sat across from him at a small cafe table because he had appeared outside her building at 7:45 and asked if she would have coffee with him, and she had said yes before her brain caught up with her mouth. Over coffee, she asked him directly. "What do you actually do?" He wrapped both hands around his cup. "Many things. Legal things." He looked at her steadily. "Some of them. And the rest." "The rest," he said, "are things I am going to keep you very far away from."
She absorbed this.
"That is not exactly reassuring." "It is the most honest thing I can offer you," he said. She looked at him across the small table. The morning light caught the edge of his jaw, and he looked, in that moment, less like an empire and more like a man. A tired one. A careful one. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because I do not intend to lie to you," he said. "And I intend to spend a great deal more time near you, so you deserve to understand the shape of what you are near." Her heart did something irresponsible. "You are incredibly presumptuous," she told him. "Yes," he agreed, unapologetically. More coffee. A few days later, Scarlett came home to find a man she had never seen waiting in the lobby of her building. He stood when she entered, produced a card that identified him as security personnel, and told her calmly that he had been assigned to her building's entrance. She called Dante immediately. "You hired security for my building," she said. "I improved your building's existing security," he said. "There is a difference." "There is not a difference. Antonio comes highly recommended."
"Dante.
"He is also excellent with dogs," he added. "If you ever get a second cat." She stood in her lobby wanting to be furious and feeling instead this terrible, traitorous warmth spreading through her ribs like tea on a cold morning. "You cannot just arrange my life," she said. "I can arrange the parts that keep you safe," he said, with the quiet certainty of a man who had decided something and would not be undone. She hung up. She said goodnight to Antonio, who nodded with professional dignity. She went upstairs and sat on her couch and told her cat Billy that she was in serious trouble. Billy blinked once and went back to sleep. Unhelpful. 2 weeks into whatever this was, Dante took her to dinner. A real dinner, just the two of them, at a place she had actually heard of, with a menu she could read and no men in black suits visible unless she counted the two she had learned to stop noticing at the edges of rooms. He was different across a candlelit table from how he was anywhere else. Still controlled, still precise, but there were moments, small ones, where something warmer surfaced. He laughed, really laughed, when she described her worst delivery experience, a 5th-floor walk-up in a heat wave with a package that turned out to be taxidermied squirrels. He asked about her family and listened with the full attention of someone who was not planning his next sentence while she spoke. She asked about his. He was quiet for a moment. "My father passed when I was 19, he said. "My mother is in Rome." She disapproves of most of my choices, but calls every Sunday regardless. What does she disapprove of? Scarlett asked. Everything, he said. The business. The city. The suits. The hours. A pause. The fact that I have not given her grandchildren. The candlelight caught the edge of a smile. She would like you, he said, and said it like a simple fact, not a performance. Scarlett looked down at her glass. You cannot know that. She would like anyone who looks at me the way you do, when you think I am not watching, he said. She looked up. He was watching her with dark, steady eyes that made the whole room feel like it had contracted slightly. How do I look at you? She said, voice quieter than she intended. Like you are trying to decide whether I am worth the trouble, he said. And like the answer keeps shifting. The trouble arrived in the form of a man named Reeves. He was a senior manager at the courier company's parent corporation, newly transferred, handsome in an obvious way, and he had decided within approximately 48 hours of meeting Scarlett that he was interested. He brought coffee to the dispatch desk. He found reasons to pass her in the hall. He leaned against door frames when she was in the room. Scarlett found him mildly irritating but harmless. Dante did not find him either of those things. She had not told Dante about Reeves. She did not think there was anything to tell. But on Thursday afternoon, Dante appeared at the courier company's front entrance, which he had never done before, with the stated purpose of collecting a document in person, a document which, Scarlett suspected, he had manufactured the need for specifically. He saw Reeves handing her a coffee cup in the lobby. He saw the way Reeves leaned slightly toward her when he spoke. He said nothing. His face did not change. But the air around him changed, the way pressure changes before weather. He caught Scarlett's eye across the lobby. Something moved through his expression so briefly she almost missed it. Something tight and coiled and very carefully restrained. Later, walking her to her car, he said nothing about it. She finally said, "You came in person for a document you could have sent a courier for." "I prefer things done correctly," he said. "Dante." He stopped walking, turned to look at her. In the parking lot light his jaw was set in a way she was beginning to recognize. "He leans toward you when he speaks," Dante said, voice low, completely controlled. "He does not need to be that close to hand you a cup." She stared at him. "Are you jealous?" A pause that was 1 second too long. "I am observant," he said. She felt something bloom in her chest that she refused to name. "He is a colleague. He is harmless." "Men like that are not harmless," he said, with the absolute conviction of someone who understood exactly how men like that thought because he had spent his life surrounded by them. She reached up and did something that surprised both of them. She pressed her hand briefly against his jaw, just for a moment, grounding the tension there. "I am having dinner with you on Saturday," she said. "Not him." Something in his face shifted. The coiled thing eased. "Yes," he said quietly. "You are." Saturday's dinner did not happen. On Friday night, Scarlett got a call from her younger brother Jalen, frantic, telling her he had gotten into something he could not get out of, a debt to people he would not name, and he needed her to meet him near the warehouse district at 10 p.m. She went without telling Dante. This was the mistake she would spend a long time thinking about. The warehouse was not where Jalen was. Two men were, men she had never seen, and they told her that her brother was fine, would stay fine, as long as she delivered a message to Dante Ricci on their behalf. The message was that his expansion into the West Side was not welcome and that his vulnerabilities had been identified. They looked at her when they said vulnerabilities. She understood immediately what they meant. She was the vulnerability. She got out. She drove home. Her hands did not shake until she was inside her apartment with the door locked, and then they shook very badly. She called Dante. He picked up on the first ring, which she had noticed he always did when it was her. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence on the line was not empty. It was full of something contained and cold and very, very focused. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Is your door locked?" "Yes." "Do not open it for anyone but me," he said. "I will be there in 12 minutes." He was there in 9. He came in and checked every room in her apartment with a thoroughness that would have been alarming under other circumstances, and then he came back to where she was sitting on the couch and crouched in front of her, so they were eye level, and looked at her face carefully. "You're sure you are not hurt?" he said. "I am sure," she said. He nodded, stood, moved to the window, and stood with his back to her for a moment, and she could see from the set of his shoulders that he was doing something internal, something deliberate, constructing control over something that wanted very badly to be otherwise. When he turned around, his face was calm. "This will not happen again," he said. "You cannot promise that." "I can," he said, with the quiet finality of someone who had already decided on every step that followed. "Your brother's debt has been cleared. The men you spoke with tonight are being handled. And you will not be used against me again, because I am going to make it known in every relevant circle that you are not a leverage point. You are protected." She stared at him. "How are you going to do that?" "By making it very clear," he said, "what the consequences would be for anyone who touches you." The room was very quiet. "Dante," she said carefully, "what exactly does that mean?" He looked at her across the room with dark, steady eyes. "It means that I am not interested in moderation where you're concerned," he said. "It means that you matter to me in a way I have not experienced before, and I am not going to pretend that is not true, or behave as though the world should not be made aware of it." She felt the words land somewhere deep and undefended. "You are frightening me," she said, and meant it differently than it would have sounded a month ago. "I know," he said. "I am sorry for that. I am not going to stop." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "That is a terrible apology." "I know," he said again, and this time the corner of his mouth moved. He stayed. He sat at her kitchen table while she made tea she did not really need, and they talked until 2 in the morning about nothing urgent, her brother's habit of getting into things he should not, his mother's very strong opinions about pasta preparation, the gallery painting that really was a poor imitation of Caravaggio. At some point the conversation became quieter, slower, the kind that happens when tiredness strips away performance and leaves only the actual people. She fell asleep on the couch. When she woke in the early morning he was gone, but there was a blanket over her that had not been there before, and her front door was locked from the inside, which meant he had not used it to leave. She sat for a long moment looking at the blanket. Then she pressed her face into it and stayed like that for a while. The following week was tense in ways that ran beneath the surface of ordinary life. Dante was less available, occupied with whatever he was managing in the aftermath of Friday night, and when she did see him, he was controlled and present but carrying something heavy behind his eyes that he did not share and she did not push on. He sent her things. Practical things. A new phone with security features she did not entirely understand. A car service account in her name. Groceries that appeared at her door on Wednesday, including the specific brand of pasta she had mentioned once, in passing, 2 weeks ago. She had not expected him to remember. She had definitely not expected him to act on it. She was building a case against herself, she knew it. Every small act of attention was adding to it. Every remembered detail. Every quiet presence at the edge of her life, steady and sure as a fixed point on a horizon. She was falling and she knew it, and she was not sure what to do with that knowledge. The catalyst, when it came, was not dramatic in its opening. It began as a misunderstanding, which is how most catastrophic things begin. Scarlett's colleague Marcus, the artist, hosted a small celebration for a gallery sale, and she went, and Reeves was there, and in a moment she did not engineer. Reeves had his arm around her shoulders for a group photograph, and she was laughing at something Marcus said, and she did not notice the phone flash or who took the picture. She also did not notice Dante in the doorway across the room, arrived late and unannounced, seeing the photograph taken. She noticed him leave. She excused herself from the group and followed him outside, and found him on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, face composed in the way she now knew meant the opposite of composed.
"Dante."
He turned. "It was a group photo," she said. "Marcus put his arm around me for a group photo. It is nothing." "I know," he said, and he probably did, but his jaw was doing the thing and his eyes were doing the darker thing, and she felt her own frustration rise sharply. "You cannot do this," she said. "You cannot look at me like that every time someone else exists in my general vicinity. I am not yours." Something moved through his face. "I know you are not," he said, very quietly. "That is the part that is making this difficult." She stopped. "Dante," she said differently. "I have no claim on you," he said. "I have no right to what I feel when I see someone else near you. I understand this. I am trying." He looked away down the street. "I am not very good at things I cannot control."
"What do you feel?" she said.
"When you see someone near me." He looked back at her. The nighttime city moved around them, indifferent. "Like the ground becomes unstable," he said. "Like every reasonable thought I have spent years building gets very far away from me, very quickly." A pause. "I have not felt this way about anything since I was 20 years old, and the last time I felt this way, I made decisions I spent a long time fixing." The honesty of it cost him something.
She could see that.
She stepped toward him. He did not step back. "I am not going anywhere with Reeves," she said. "I am not going anywhere with anyone. I have been standing right here for weeks, and you have been standing right there, and I think we both know what is actually happening, and neither of us has said it. I am entirely in love with you. I have been, I think, from the moment you stood in that doorway and refused to look away." The world went very still. She pressed her face into his chest. His arms went around her, tight and absolute, and he held her the way people hold things they thought they had already lost. What followed belongs only to them. The night was quiet, the city was kind, and by the time the lamplight changed toward morning, everything between them had shifted into something irrevocable and new. She left before he woke. This was not a decision she made with her full mind. It was an older fear, one she had carried since long before Dante Ricci, the fear that when morning came and all the warmth of confession was replaced with daylight, she would see regret on his face, or worse, careful politeness. She could not survive careful politeness from him. She did not want to watch what had felt like the most honest night of her life become something he was managing. So she left. She went home, sat on her bathroom floor with Billy in her lap, and cried in a very quiet, controlled way that she told herself was just release and not grief. She texted Dana 3 words. "I ruined it." Dana called immediately. Scarlett did not answer. By midday Dante had called 4 times. She did not answer. By afternoon there were 12 messages, each shorter than the last, which somehow made them more significant. The final one was simply, "Tell me where you are. Please." She sat on her couch with her phone face down and told herself this was the sensible thing. Distance.
Clarity.
Not letting herself believe in something that lived in a world of danger and controlled silences and men who disappeared from rooms without using doors. Her downstairs buzzer rang at 4:17. She did not answer it. 2 minutes later, someone knocked on her apartment door, and she knew from the particular quality of the knock, 3 precise, unhurried impacts, that it was him. She did not know how he had gotten past Antonio downstairs. Then she remembered he had hired Antonio, so she supposed that answered it. She opened the door. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a man who had not slept. His tie was gone. His jacket was gone. His eyes found her face with the focused relief of someone who had been searching. "You left," he said. "I was afraid," she said. There was no point in performing anything else.
"Of what?" he said.
"That you would wake up and want it to be a mistake," she said. "That you would look at me in the morning and be practical about it. You are very practical." Something crossed his face that looked almost like pain. "Scarlett," he said. "I woke up and you were gone, and I have spent the last 5 hours doing the least practical things I have ever done in my life, including but not limited to calling my mother in Rome at 3 in the morning to tell her I had found someone." She stared at him. "You called your mother?" "She cried," he said. "She would like to meet you. She has opinions about the wedding already, which I will spare you for now." Scarlett opened her mouth.
Closed it.
"You are absolutely ridiculous," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word, which is how he knew she was not upset. He crossed the threshold and she stepped back and let him in, and he pulled her into his arms in the entryway of her small apartment and held on. "You do not get to leave without telling me," he said into her hair, not as a command but as something more like a plea. "I will not recover from it efficiently." It has already been established. She laughed despite herself, the real one, the one she saved, and she felt him exhale at the sound of it. The danger, however, was not finished with them. 3 days after the morning she had left and he had followed, Scarlett was intercepted leaving the courier office by a man who identified himself as a federal investigator and told her, very politely, that she was not in trouble, but that she was seen with Dante Ricci on multiple occasions, and that they were building a case, and that her cooperation could protect her from any implications of association. She listened to everything he said. She thanked him for the information. And then she called Dante's lawyer, whose number Dante had given her 3 weeks ago with the instruction to call it if anyone from any government agency ever approached her, a moment she had found dramatic at the time. She understood now why he had done it. The lawyer was at her side within the hour. The investigator, she later learned, had overstepped his authority in approaching her and was spoken to about it by people significantly above his station. Dante did not tell her how this happened.
She did not ask.
There were parts of his world that moved in parallel to hers, and she was learning which one she could live beside, and which one she needed him to keep at the required distance. That evening he came over, and they sat together in her kitchen, and she said, "I need to know something." "Yes," he said. "The things you do that are not legal," she said. "Do they hurt people?" He was very still for a moment. Then, "Not people who are innocent of harm." She looked at him. "I need that to be true," she said. "It is true," he said, and met her eyes with the same unflinching honesty he had offered from the very beginning, in a restaurant she had wandered into from a storm, when he had told her he ran things she could not know about and intended to keep her far from them. She nodded, slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he repeated, like a contract, like a covenant. A month later, Chiara came back from Milan to visit again, and brought with her the news that Dante's most significant rival, a man named Ferraro who operated out of the Northeast, and who had been behind the warehouse incident, and the investigator, and likely several other things Scarlett had not been fully informed of, had made a final play for Dante's operation while Dante was at Scarlett's apartment having dinner, and was therefore exactly where no one with hostile intentions had expected him
to be.
Ferraro's people had gone to Dante's downtown office. His people had not been there. They had been where Dante directed them to be, which was not the office. The play failed completely. Ferraro was currently handling this failure in a federal holding facility, which is where his decisions had finally and inevitably delivered him. Chiara told this story with the brisk satisfaction of someone recounting a sports victory at Scarlett's kitchen table, over espresso, as though it were very ordinary information. "He was distracted before you," Chiara told Scarlett pleasantly. "Not strategically."
"He was always strategic."
"But he was," she paused, searching. "Hollow." Scarlett glanced across the kitchen to where Dante was reading something at the counter, his reading glasses on, which she had only recently discovered he required, and which she found completely devastating in a way she was keeping to herself. "He is not hollow now," Chiara said, following her gaze. She smiled. "He is, in fact, the opposite of hollow." The following Saturday, Dante took her to a rooftop. Not a dramatic one. A quiet one, above a building he owned in the part of the city that had the best view of the river when the evening light hit it correctly. He had set up a table, 2 chairs, dinner, candles, which she teased him about because he had previously given the impression of being too controlled for candles. "I contain multitudes," he said, pulling out her chair with a formality he could not seem to shed even when everything else was relaxed. She sat. He sat. They ate. The river reflected orange and pink and something close to gold. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set a ring box on the table between them. She looked at it, then at him. "Dante, you do not have to decide tonight," he said. "I want you to know I am not in a hurry. I am also not going anywhere. And I want you to understand that this is not about safety or protection, or any of the practical calculations I am capable of." He looked at her steadily. "This is about the fact that I would like to spend the rest of my life with you in my kitchen at 2 in the morning arguing about whether your pasta water has enough salt in it." She put her hand over her mouth. "It never has enough salt," he added gently. She laughed, which became something else entirely, something warm and overwhelmed and real, and he watched her with a particular expression she had come to recognize as the one he saved for her only, the one where everything that was usually locked found a small opening. She reached across the table and opened the box. The ring was elegant, dark-stoned, nothing like what she might have imagined if she had imagined this, which she had, recently, more than she was ready to tell him. "Yes," she said. He did not move for a moment, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. "Yes," she repeated. He stood, came around the table, took her face in his hands, and pressed his forehead to hers in the quiet above the city and the river and the evening light, and he said nothing for a long time, which was fine, because this was one of those moments where everything that needed to be said was already in the room. They were married in April, in a ceremony that Dante's mother had very strong opinions about, and that was therefore perfect, held in a garden outside the city with ivy on the stone walls and light coming through old trees and Chiara crying, which she denied loudly, while continuing to do it. Dante's mother took one look at Scarlett in the morning before the ceremony and held her face in both hands and said something in Italian. Dante translated it later as roughly equivalent to, "You are exactly who I prayed for." Scarlett had to go fix her makeup after that. Dana was maid of honor and cried at every stage of the day, including the car ride over. Jalen walked Scarlett down the aisle and was so proud and straight-backed doing it that he could have carried a small nation. Antonio, the security man, attended as a guest, which turned out to be because he had been with Dante's family for 15 years and the professional distance facade was, apparently, just his personality. Dante waited at the end of the aisle in a suit that made every prior suit look informal, and when Scarlett came around the corner and saw him, his face did the thing it only did for her, and she walked toward him like she had been doing it her whole life and had simply been finding her way to the moment. The vows were traditional and specific and entirely true. 8 months after the wedding, Scarlett sat at the kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning with a small test in her hand and Dante across from her with his coffee halfway to his lips, reading glasses on, completely unaware. She put the test on the counter between them.
He looked at it.
He set down his coffee very slowly. He looked at her. "Scarlett," he said. "Yes," she said. He came around the counter, picked her up off the stool, held her, and she could feel that he was shaking slightly, which was the most unexpected and complete thing she had ever experienced from him. "I need to call my mother," he said into her hair. "It is 4 in the morning in Rome," she said.
"She will want to know," he said.
"She absolutely will," Scarlett agreed, and felt his laugh against her cheek. Outside the kitchen window, the city was going about its morning. Somewhere in the world Dante navigated, there would always be something requiring management, always some current to read, some move to anticipate. He would always be the man who stood in a room full of dangerous people and made them very still with nothing but his presence. He would always be partially composed of shadows. But here, in this kitchen, with her, he was just a man who remembered which brand of pasta she liked and put too much thought into umbrella selection and called his mother in the middle of the night for things that mattered. She pressed her face against his shoulder. The city moved. The morning came. The story continued. As it will. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that love, even when it arrives in a storm and carries a little danger in its hands, can be the truest and most transforming thing in a life. Subscribe to the Mafia Codes channel so you never miss a story, and please leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from, tell me your favorite moment, tell me who you would cast as Dante and Scarlett because I genuinely want to know. Your comments, likes, and subscriptions help us reach more people who need these stories of hope, of love that chooses, of hearts that find each other across crowded rooms and refuse to look away. We will see you in the next one.